What is up, guys? It is Aniki here, coming to talk to you about the latest chapter of My Hero Academia and the Dobby greatness. Let's go. Blue flames, putting them out, not burning myself. I know how to handle my quirk, unlike a certain somebody. But before we get into all of that, let's discuss the fact that we got further exposition on how Twice's quirk functions. And we got further clarification. We had already talked about this. He needs measurements. He needs to know the person, but it even applies to objects, or inanimate objects, I should say, where he can't just replicate a computer if he doesn't understand the specs that are within it or anything like that. And I think that's a good way to balance it out because it stops him from being a better version of Momo, where he can just, look up something and instantly make it, because that would make him, Momo plus a guy with like the Shadow Clone Jutsu on tap. But it does mean that if he, for example, had a high quality pistol or a rifle or something like that, he could just infinitely spawn bullets if he felt like it, or like full, machine guns or something like that. So I think that would in of itself would be like kind of interesting if Twice, studied, like sniper rifle specs, started making sniper rifles, would like shoot them and then like just toss them off of a building or whatever, and they'd break, instantly destroying whatever the weapon was, that he had made, so that there'd be no evidence or way to trace it back to him. Even though that's not at all the way Twice fights, it's just a thing you could do with this quirk. But one of the things that's important to remember is that during this scene, he talks about how he really was sorry that he couldn't be more useful and make it up to Shigaraki. And I think this is a really nice callback to when you remember when Shigaraki tells Twice, when he's convincing him to go hang out with Overhaul and the Expendables, he says to him, hey, you said you wanted to make up for what you did. This is how you do it. And so in that way, like, yes, they managed to get the bullets, but then they got the bullets because they figured out where Shigaraki and then were managed to cut off Overhaul as he was en route to prison, essentially. And so he Twice obviously still doesn't feel like he completely atoned for the death of Magne. And in that same way, also Toga, when she helps him out and, is like putting the blanket on his head or whatever, it's, she helps him out, saves him, and so he's here now. He is focused on saving people, helping out his friends, his nakama, and making up to them for all the times that he feels that he's let them down, even though necessarily being able to replicate the bullets isn't something that he should have necessarily expected. But it is something. In fact, even when you look at Shigaraki's face, he seems kind of disappointed, but not necessarily at Twice, just more like he understands that, hey, okay, that's the limit of his quirk. He can't do that. Unfortunately for everybody that is a huge Fate fan, I myself actually have a Fate Stay Zero wallet that is for Kiritsugu Emiya, but it was not a Twice reference. I mean, a Blade Works reference. That was just a fanlation having fun. Got to remember that these scanlators do their own thing. They go for the feel of what the mangaka is saying, not literal word-for-word translations, in part to avoid copyright infringement, I'm sure. And so instead it's just infinite doubles, which actually makes more sense, fits in line with who Twice is. Also, for that Blade Works reference to work, he would kind of need to have clarity that the Fate verse existed within the context of My Hero Academia, and with this being at least 100 and 150 years ahead of our time, even though it did stagnate somewhat technologically due to the Quirk Society manifesting, it's important to realize that there's almost no reason to assume that the Fate Zero series or Fate Blade Works would be relevant, even if it did actually exist. And the Sad Man's Parade is another reference to, I believe, a DC comic, but I might be a little off there. So one of the things that's great, though, is that because these are clones, because they're expendable, you kind of get these close-up shots of them catching the blip blap right in the face, and getting headshot by these members of the Liberation Army, and they're like, we got to make sure we make up for Skeptic because of the fact that his doppelgangers got destroyed. And as you transition, we get, again, I'm more and more convinced every chapter that we get a lot of close-ups of Redestro, that his quirk is very heavily tied to his emotions and stockpiling and converting that into some kind of energy or something along those lines, because we get another one that like emphasizes, like, he's always got these very dramatized expressions. His eyes are very wide, and he goes, oh, how do we overcome? He overcame his psychological barrier. His shock displays are so extravagant. His offhand remarks that are, when he tells Skeptic that he failed, is very snide, and you can kind of see he's so very smug, and it's very well drawn into that, in which we finally get to see Skeptic's eyes this chapter. And we knew he was a grumpy boy, but we didn't realize that he basically was such a frustrated person that he unlocked the Byakugan and just had veins popping out of his eyes. And he straight up tells him, "Hey man, don't you say I fail. You don't have to take them words back, bro. I don't fail. That's not what I do. We're just gonna move into the next phase of my calculations." And then you get that close up of Redestro, and he's got that. It kind of reminds me of that angry look that he kind of gave Miyashita, aka Young Beppo, at the very introduction when he was introduced in chapter 218 before he snapped his neck, where he seemed very upset with him. And then you get, the fadeaway of him like looking down as if he's like kind of sad, because I don't think he expects Skeptic to live. I don't think he expects that. But I also think he's genuinely disappointed in the turn of events. But to that same notion, Giron here, who's a real boss of a character. I don't expect him to live through this arc, if I'm being honest, but I do like the fact that he's 100% willing to talk that mess while he's sitting in that chair with his fingers cut off and all that other good stuff, because he's like, hey, yo, my homies outside, they pulling up. They pulling up with the strap. And you see Twice is out here just dropping clones on clones on clones, and he's like, yeah, Twice overcame his, mental hurdles, so which this is extra bad for you guys. He can make enough people to take you out regardless. And then Redestro says, we're going to make up for that quality, or that quantity with quality. Isn't that right, Geten? Now, Geten in Japanese translates to Apocrypha, which is the English word for biblical texts that are non-canonical, but is also a reference to non-Buddhist texts, specifically non-Confucian text. However, Geten is also a Swedish word for goat. So, depending on how much of a meme lord Horikoshi is, he could be saying that Apocrypha is the GOAT of the MLA and thus their strongest member. I don't know if he's reaching in the bag that far, but I'm just saying it's a weird coincidence. I'm just putting it out there, putting that energy into the universe, because I looked up the word Geten. I wanted to see if it was just a word for Apocrypha in Japanese, and the Swedish word popped up instantly, was actually the first one to pop up over the Japanese definition. So I thought I'd let you guys know about that if you hadn't looked into that and seen that. And of course, we get Dabi saying, I've got more fire, I've got more stuff on deck. I'm out here, making these moves. Your ice isn't anything compared to what I can do. And Compress is like, yo, dog, then help me out. If this is a no diff contest for you, come look out for your boy. And Dabi's like, nah, I ain't feeling that. But the reason for it shows that while Compress has been tracking his actual allies, even his combat sense, which I think is a really good touch, is that each of them is excelling in certain aspects of combat, and Compress was worried about getting the team back together, but he's also, because he's not as high a scale of a combatant, and he's got less of a view, because Dabi's out here. At the end of the day, none of the fodder members of the MLA are getting close to Dabi right now. The size of the torrents of his flames, they're wider than buildings. Some of the blasts have been at least as wide as a city block. Nobody's trying to be right next to the guy that's making city block level explosions of flame, especially not blue flame, basically instantly cauterizing and carbonizing their bodies. That's just not what people like to do with their days. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, because he goes, hey, Twice clones can help you. And so once they pull up, they're like, yeah, we're gonna save you, we're gonna have a massacre, woo. And this is an army. This makes the giant crowd of people that Shigaraki disintegrated look like nothing. And that's something that is especially awesome to kind of see, Twice just out here just pumping the clones out. Everybody's just doubling him. But then one of the Twice clones says, oh god, I'm an idiot, I should be making copies of Dabi. Specifically, he thinks about making copies of Dabi, because Dabi could just burn everything down. But to that same token, Compress says, well, we still need these people to fight against Gigantomachia in an hour, which we get confirmation that it's an hour and 5 minutes from now. I'd actually thought we'd have more time passing, but due to the fact that, as it's explained later in the chapter, that Dabi has that hard limit on his quirk, it makes more sense than why it transitioned into a period of which he could not access his power. If he was going for 30 minutes, it wouldn't emphasize the significance of that vulnerability nearly as well if he's only been fighting for 15 minutes and his flesh is already starting to as Geten says, it looks like it's going to slough off, which basically means that as he's heating up, there's a chance that it's boiling from within, and his skin will actually melt and start to fall off. Basically, he's blistering from the inside as he's fighting, which is actually way worse than just having like the surface of his skin burned. Because that also means he's starting to burn his muscle layers. As a guy in Bragos, shout out to Squidward, we were discussing the fact that it seems like he's got 4th degree burns that go beyond the skin layer, and his skin is almost in a consistent state of infection. But I would say that Bobby's body is good enough to handle the infection at this point, and that like because he does use his flames regularly enough, he's probably killing off a lot of the harmful bacteria, and so it's more of a, like the residual, the effect of having said infection, but not necessarily dealing with the illnesses that would come with having that level of infection, leading to gangrene, having to have limbs removed, etc. But the thing that I think is especially great is that maybe I didn't say it in my 229 review. I believe I covered this in 228, where I said the only reason for I called them Mr. Ice Climbers, but now Geten, to have believed that he could not be Dabi couldn't melt his ice is if he could refreeze things using ice that already existed. And we get confirmation of that in this chapter, where Geten directly states, I can put my ice inside the sewer lines, and we get a spectacular panel of lots of twices, lots of buildings. Like it looks like an entire city block possibly just getting uprooted by ice coming out of the sewer system and just spiking everything through. It's far more massive than anything we've seen out of Todoroki, in the same way that the flames that we're seeing out of Dabi are bigger than what we've seen out of Todoroki. And he goes, as I explained, I can manipulate ice. And one of the things that's kind of cool is that Geten says to Dabi, in a meta-liberation battle, it's important that you analyze your opponent's abilities, or meta abilities, and comprehend them. And then when you see the water land on Dabi, he goes, it's like that, as he notices it freezes, even before Geten starts to fully explain it. Because he, like makes a little joke, but like once he realizes what's happening, he goes, he's consistently dropping the temperature. And I think it's good to know that it seems like they're both the same level of intellect. And so this isn't like a one-sided battle necessarily. The only thing that's making it come off that way is the fact that, unlike Endeavor, he can't just spout these gouts of flame and be fine. He's got like more of a recoil to his quirk. So this is more of a battle of a better quirk versus, one with like more recoil, and that's what's deciding the fight for the most part. Not necessarily their skill or their intellect, which, when you think about what the guy from the Meta Liberation Army goes on to say, talking about the fact that power will decide the future, you notice that Dabi gets angry again. And once again, I will pose, we had him get kind of angry at the whole comment about how, you must have an issue with your quirk. And then we see him once again getting angry at the might is right, the strongest quirk is the best, etc., like jargon that Apocrypha is spewing. And I do think that is directly tied in with the way Endeavor treated him, and the way that like it was such an emphasis growing up on having the best quirk, having the best training with said quirk, being as powerful as the next guy, etc., like making sure you are over everyone. And that's where Dabi's disgust with Apocrypha is stemming from, his obsession with the fact that he's got such a good quirk and he's so powerful with it, when that's exactly what his father, that was like abusive to him and all that other stuff, was just like. Which is why he's constantly like, okay, every time he says these things, he's kind of like, can you die? Or he shoots out big torrents of flames, because he hates this dude that's essentially just dragging up the messed up childhood that he had and bringing it to the forefront of his mind, essentially triggering him and giving him like a PTSD episode. So I'm kind of excited to see if next chapter, maybe Horikoshi will once again blue ball us with the blue flames, and make it a point to not show us next chapter. But I think we're getting closer and closer to the confirmation that Touya, Dabi's fucking Touya. If you don't believe me, better go and read these chapters, bruh. Because I'm telling you, like, that's where we are now. Like, at this point, if this isn't Touya, Horikoshi is the master baiter. Pause. Like, without question, if Horikoshi isn't saying that Dabi is suffering because of the fact that he's got this bad quirk and was the son of Todoroki, I don't know what he's going for at this point. Yes, it might just be like designed to have like a crazy plot twist, but the idea of Touya inheriting Rei's weak constitution, of Touya being absconded from the family, of the fact that Natsuo doesn't know where he is. In fact, one of the things that I think would make this fascinating is we talked about Ice Climbers potentially being Natsuo, and actually I think that this rhetoric might put that ball in his court even more. The idea of this being a possible battle of the brothers without either brother knowing is fascinating to me, because one brother rejected that notion and went off on his own. Another one joined a society that would have liberated his quirk further, appreciated his quirk further, and trained it more. The only reason why I don't think that can be true at this point is because of the fact that he said the supreme leader was always training him. But for all we know, that could have still been in the context of like he would skip school when he was a kid, or skip school as he got older, and then eventually skipped out on college to further like keep training us. And he's just lying and saying he's a medical student, which I think would be a great way to show like the different like ways to rebel, in which Dabi rebelled because he was focused and trained but in like his flames and suffered for the strength of his quirk essentially, whereas Natsuo would have had a good quirk, but because it wasn't the quirk that his father wanted, would have been rejected, and to spite him has gone on to train that quirk to be better than what Endeavor expected it to be, to show that he could be the best even without having the model quirk. So that could be a good explanation for his rage. And I think the fact that Dabi's flesh is burning enough that these people are outside fighting and he can still smell it is a very nice touch. For the record, when human flesh burns, it does have a very distinct scent. I'm not telling you to go and like light your hand on fire to test this out or anything like that, or to possibly, you know, like just hold a lighter to your hand and like sniff it after you burn it for a little while. I'm not saying do those things, but I am telling you that there is a very distinct scent to burning human flesh. And so it's definitely something you would notice. It's I'm not going to try to describe it because it's very different than like, it's almost like it's as pungent as hair burning, but has a definitely like a different, it's a rough scent. And that's all I can tell you really. But one of the cool things that was also like caught within these panels is that when all those ice shards were coming out of the ground, multiple Dabi clones went out of their way to save Compress and ended up dying in the process. And that goes to show you that while Twice could never trust himself or be loyal to himself, he was definitely 100% genuinely caring about his friends, to the extent that he has clones who are willing to die for his friends because they know they're clones at this point. Like all the ones that like are coming out, they're wearing the mask. They see the original body without the mask, so they know they're fake, but it doesn't matter right now. Or even if some of them don't want to believe they're fake, that doesn't matter. What matters is saving their friends because they know they can get away with it. And I think that's kind of beautiful. And one of the things that I said is like Twice is the real shonen protagonist of this anime, but for Horikoshi to acknowledge that as a joke and say, wow, this kind of sounds like the start of a hero story, but you're a villain. And Twice is just like, man, villains can save their friends too. Which once again, the anime kind of ruined this, but I want to emphasize this again. The first time that like the power of friendship and like, oh, we're friends and that's why we three work together was mentioned was when Amajiki took on those three dudes, the one with the quirk of larceny, the one who had the quirk of crystallize, and the one that and the one that could eat. The one that had the chomping quirk. Those three quirks, those three dudes, they mentioned like being friends and powerful. In the anime, they changed this and they have that conversation come up when we get the expounding upon what Momo and Sue and Shoji and Jiro did to pass the provisional license exam. But it's important to remember that that was the first time canonically, or fine, that counts as like canon now because the anime is canon. Horikoshi makes it a point. He himself said that he likes to add things to the series in the anime that count, just so that manga readers have a bonus reason and an incentive to keep watching it. But I will say still, though, that like when Horikoshi was right in the fact that friendship is more of a thing that those who fall into villainy care about or have as their motive, because at the end of the day, the people who are ending up villains because of the ostracization that goes on in society, whether it be because of the fact that, oh, you look like a creature, aka Spinner, who was grown up being called Lizard Boy, or it's because your quirk makes you have strange desires that are just not compatible with regular human society, or if it's because of the fact that, as my buddies and I were speculating, that perhaps Compress, who we are positive used to be an entertainer, and you know he lost his daughter, and there's a chance that something went wrong with his quirk during one of his shows, and that he got rejected because of the fact that he was a magician using a quirk instead of it just being pure sleight of hand. So, all in all, I think there's a lot of emphasis on why familial bonds are far more important for those that are ostracized than for those who are already accepted. Because even though Deku was made fun of for not having a quirk, that's still better than the treatment that people who have straight up body altering quirks have, like Shoji, who wears a mask for some unknown reason, but also states to Pony he's had people fear him and make fun of him his entire life. The thing that I think is fascinating is that this hardly seems fair, is what Ujiko says, and letting them die is not what All for One would want. So your master's successor is struggling with almost no sleep. Well, without any sleep. So get up, Makia. The idea, I think this kind of solidifies that Ujiko is leaning more and more and more and more towards the support of Shigaraki, even without having him tame Gigantomachia, to the extent that he's willing to wake up Gigantomachia, and who's apparently going to have to sojourn across Japan, essentially, because Caleb Cook, who does the translations for the Viz, posted a map highlighting the regions of Japan and like where it would, like how long it would take to get there, and it's basically like straight up across, like in a north to south angle. And so, but I believe he's going to basically more or less Hulk jump there. Horikoshi's a big fan of Marvel, and I could see him doing that as like a reference of Gigantomachia just kind of jumping, but that also red flagging heroes and newscasters throughout the country, and essentially helicopters and newscopters pulling up on Deka as Gigantomachia lands, only for them to see the MLA and the League of Villains at this huge scale war, further shattering the trust that people have in hero society, culminating to the idea of the Meta Liberation Army's goals of people wanting to be able to train with their quirks more, because the reality is, if a citywide war can happen between what's alleged basically a terrorist group, because it would definitely come out, like they would leak the information some way, that Redestro, Skeptic, Curious, and all these people, like Hanabata, the bishop, essentially, all these people are out here with high profile roles in society, but they basically founded an entire army with the plans of usurping the government. These people would be worried about, one, what if another terrorist group shows up and because I'm not a part of it, I'm going to die. I need to be able to protect myself. Two, these 6 villains pulled up on one city and killed dozens upon hundreds upon thousands of people. I do not feel safe. Where were the heroes? Oh, turns out some of these heroes were just standing around rerouting traffic just to let this resurrection festival happen. So heroes cannot be trusted. The League of Villains' goal is accomplished. People will now want to be able to use their quirks. The Meta Liberation Army's goal is accomplished. The cities are destroyed. Shigaraki gains access to Gigantomachia, finally earning his loyalty if they manage to find a way to drop him. Basically, what you have is the culmination of multiple goals, 200 plus chapters of setup, because there's been a lot of foreshadowing. In fact, almost every arc except the joint training arc before this one, from the Culture Festival, the Remedial arc, the events that are mentioned like during the provisional license exam, the Endeavor arc, because for 2 arcs in a row, we actually had people who were inspired by the Meta Liberation Army appear. Gentile himself had a copy of the Redestro book and was specifically talking about Destro, Oiji Harima, and All for One as like these big villains. But then you also had, within the Endeavor arc, Hawks casually no-diffing a guy that was going to go to his company with the quirk Shane, who he was tired of living the way he had been and decided he was going to live free and was going to just rip off his cloak, be naked, get powerful, and go on a rampage in his office. So the idea that these people have been built up for a while and their influence is permeated through society, and I highly doubt that was an MLA-sanctioned mission. So that means that, without a doubt, we have, even if the Meta Liberation Army generals fall here, there will still be those sexts and those cells, and in the same way that Stain falling got more people recruited to the League of Villains side, there will be villains who will want to join the League of Villains because they took down the Meta Liberation Army, but there will also be people within the Meta Liberation Army that will take up and form new sectors, new cells, making multiple Liberation Army posts, now leading to multiple gangs essentially existing that want to fight for liberation. So that's just like my speculation on where the story's headed, the potential ramifications of this arc, and what's happening right now, especially with the potential setup for it to lead to eventual civil war within the next year or two, especially because the only thing that I really think we need to see out of year 2 of My Hero Academia, as far as like their second year of high school, is the potential joint sports festival between Shiketsu and UA that might have been hinted at during the Remedial Course Act when Shishikima, or I'll just call him Meat Boy in case I butchered his name, and All Might were talking about potentially doing joint training exercises because of the nature of what's happening within society. So I could see that being something that would, alert the masses and they would be interested in that, but it would also be a good showing that not only UA is a powerful school, we have more up and coming heroes, and that might help inspire some confidence in the average civilian, but we definitely are heading more and more away from a stable and structured society. So, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like what I had to say, please like, subscribe, share. I think that this chapter was an 8 out of 10. I think it's setting up some really good stuff. I'm really hoping that we finally get the Touya reveal, and if we don't, I would like to believe that we will get a shift to focusing on Compress. Hopefully Compress versus Hanabata, because they're both showmen of a sort, and I would love to kind of see how that plays out. It's also worth noting that while Twice did finish off Toga finished off Curious. Twice is not done with Skeptic at all, and so we have more to come in those fights. So those fights aren't over. So only one member of the Liberation Army has fallen so far, and one member of the League of Villains has fallen. So we still have a lot to go. This arc is probably going to be at least 20 to 25 chapters. I'm expecting it to be at least as long as Joint Training. So I hope you guys enjoy the content. I hope you enjoy the analysis. I'm going to keep doing these deconstructions. I was supposed to do a stream today, had to cancel. I'm hoping that maybe next Friday or Saturday or Sunday, somewhere within that weekend, that I can get a stream going, get some guys in here, all discuss what we think about My Villain Academia and what's going on in the current arc and where it's leading to, what we expect out of the story, etc. So like I said, if you liked it, give feedback. I'm always down for the feedback. Let me know what you think of my analysis and critiques. It's important for me to understand what you guys like and what you guys want to see out of the channel so that I can give it to you. And just so you guys know, there's a good chance that I'll be doing more. I will start doing content on vigilantes. I'm just planning on doing a reread before I do that to make sure that I know what I'm talking about, because I don't want to, because it's a bi-weekly, I don't want to, have a lot of things that are falling out of my head that might be important, especially if I start doing character analysis videos on those characters, especially Knuckle Duster. He will be getting one without a doubt. I'm definitely going to reread vigilantes, at least for no other reason than to at least give you guys a video on Knuckle Duster, because I think he's a very fascinating character, and he ties in with Stain's backstory. So, you guys have a wonderful day. Anarchy out.